Limits of the Flesh, Chapter 11, Fantasy Fiction by Azazyel. While we came together to teleport our group outside Kuoh's old, abandoned church, Rias was giving another little pep talk, but while I tuned her out, I changed my body into combat mode, basically with my ribs connecting into a solid flexible plate to cover my fragile organs. I moved my heart above and behind the top of my spine, along with making an extra one near the bottom of my spine and where my heart was previously. I created another smaller, more compact lung to enhance my breathing as well as to power the super acid gland I implanted at the base of my throat. "Jake, you hungry, or something?" Koneko asked quietly as she truly grudgingly offered me a candy bar she had in her pocket. I couldn't help patting Koneko's head, and she stiffened and almost looked ready to either rip the offending arm off or just bite the shit out of me, but I was a biokinetic, I was a cheater, and within a moment Koneko was purring as my hand rubbed and scratched at her scalp. "It's okay, Koneko, I was just changing the internals of my body so I could be better in battle," I explained, with the cat girl merely nodding as her heavily dilated hazy eyes stared past me. "Koneko never lets me head pat her," Rias grumbled, and as I looked around to see the other peerage's reactions, I saw everyone was holding back snickers at the sight except for Rias, who looked genuinely jealous at our little interaction. I then moved my hand off of Koneko's head and her eyes managed to lock up onto mine before she huffed and shook her head clear of the little interaction. "Don't do that again. Without my permission," she muttered without any heat as she kept her head down so I couldn't see her expression, but either way I agreed. "All right. Let's get going. Sona and her peerage are probably already wondering what's taking us so long," Akino said, clapping her hands and making us all firm up. Then we left the little clearing we teleported into as we headed towards the fenced-off church that was in view. As we stepped onto the church's ground, I saw my fellow peerage members shudder at the feeling of stepping onto the hallowed ground, but thankfully with all my modifications I didn't have such weaknesses to holy and light energies. "Koneko, break in," Rias ordered, and Koneko jumped in place for a moment before she dashed forward, and with a monotone war cry, she punched the large wooden church doors so hard they shattered and sent shards of wood everywhere in the church. Then Kiba ran forward using his enhanced knight speed with an English-style long sword coated in flames as he used his sacred gear sword birth that could form demonic swords at will. I then was about to run in as well with my boosted gear being summoned to my arm, but before I could even do so I had to dodge as from the surrounding forests came a trio of holy light lances. "A bunch of filthy devils are invading a holy church. What else is new?" A female voice snarled, and from out of the tree-lined shadows came a blue-haired fallen angel, and I could see from how she was flying that despite her wearing something resembling slutty office wear clothes for ladies, she most certainly didn't have anything beneath it, as her wide-open cleavage went down past her large breasts to the edge of her ribs, and with the skirt that only covered her ass it was plain, she wasn't wearing anything below that. "I can literally smell the blasphemy you guys committed here. This is no longer a house of God," I said, snorting at the thought of the fallen claiming how the derelict and further ruined by the church they were squatting in was something holy. "Jake, I will leave this one to you. Me and Akino will make sure no other fallen escape," Rias said, giving the fallen a look of disdain as she and her queen turned their back to the busted stripper of a fallen. "Don't fucking turn your back to me, you bitch," the blue-haired fallen roared with fury as she made a large golden spear of light form between her hands, and with a sound of tearing air the holy lance flew towards Rias's back. "Yeah, no," I muttered as I slapped the holy spear out of the air, shattering it on the indestructible gauntlet. "Looks like I am your opponent, little stripper," I said as I lashed out with my other hand, and with a sickening sound, the arm I had morphed while she was grandstanding and Rias walked away, stretched and contorted as the coiled and compressed muscles I had prepared lashed out like a chameleon's tongue or even like Luffy's punches. But I didn't bother with a punch. As my arm reached her flying form, I raked over her face with my poison-coated sharpened fingernails, making her scream in agony as the acidic paralytic agent both inflamed and ruined her nerves through overstimulation. Despite my landing the harsh blow that all but blinded the fallen, I did pay for the blow by getting my hand cut off by her. "Merely a flesh wound," I tittered as I gamely stuck the cut-off hand back onto the stump as I walked forward towards the fallen that was screaming in agony on the ground. Thank God I turned off my own sense of pain before the fight, as I would likely be screaming and crying with my own hand being cut off, but with my flesh-crafting abilities by the time I walked the 10 or so meters over to who I finally recognized as Calawarner, just another of one of Raynair's little cell of fallen being led by the nose. For a moment I stared at the now whimpering form of Calawarner, who was falling unconscious due to the shock of the toxins running through her veins and getting an express delivery to her brain and such, with how it got deposited in the facial area. "Go to sleep. You won't have to worry about anything else," I muttered as I kneeled and placed my hand on her neck and flooded her mind with another chemical cocktail, and the fallen twitched heavily like she was having a seizure as I began pulling out the toxins I put into her comatose form. With Calawarner now asleep, I could pay more attention to my surroundings, and I could hear quite clearly the sound of screaming human rouge exorcists. Kiba and Koneko were probably killing with impunity. Then as I was dragging Calawarner into the church's wide-open front doors, I had to dodge as a small petite form of another fallen being blasted past me by a bolt of lightning. "Aquino! Friendly fire, damn it!" I yelled as I dropped Calawarner to the ground and walked over to the petite form of the fallen angel, who seemed, with how much she was twitching, to still be alive, but as I reached down to knock her out, I realized so much of her biomass was charred with third-degree electric burns that it wasn't even worth keeping her for biomass. Damn. I sighed, letting go, as with her being so burnt, I didn't even see the value of carrying her carcass around. But as I went to walk away to pull Calawarner into the church to see if Rainier was still alive for me to work an experiment upon, I felt a weak hand lock around my ankle. "I don't want to die. It hurts," she whimpered, and I could hear her burnt flesh crackling like fried pork skins, and I shuddered at the thought. For a long moment, I stared at who I remembered to be Middled, the fallen who didn't do anything wrong in canon and was just basically a token lowly that was killed without her having any real impact on the story by Rias and Aquino. "Fuck it," I cursed as I kneeled down and then placed my hands atop Middled's face and first fully knocked her out and deadened her nerves so I could begin the normally agonizing task of divorcing her third-degree burns from her body. And as I made the small woman lose half of her biomass as I fixed and replaced her organs and other bits, I realized something as I began absently regrowing her nails. With a different tone of hair, she looks a lot like Klee with her already elfin ears. I muttered before shrugging, as I had already practically scrambled and reformatted her mind to give her back the ability to walk as well, to make sure she wasn't an issue during or after my flesh crafting practice. Might as well make a lowly. Not like she has the biomass to become anything else. I muttered, as not only was she a small girl, to begin with, but with her being a burnt mess and needing so much restoration, she lost even more biomass to replace the organs that Aquino fried beyond my ability to fix. Now, with a Klee light from Genshin lying on the ground outside the church, I went into the church to see if there was anything salvageable.